Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. I think I echo the sentiments of many people here when I give my thanks to IGEL for organizing a very timely conference. So my presentation today is going to focus briefly on developing countries' perspectives when it comes to the impacts of climate change. And when I was told to prepare this presentation, I must admit that I struggled. I struggled a bit to draw out stark differences between the impacts of climate change in developed world and the developing countries. Perhaps just to start by giving a brief example, a lot of my examples will be drawn from Kenya, which is a sub-Saharan country in the East African region. So let's talk about floods. I think a lot of the presentations have mentioned water, rising waters. We are talking about Hurricane Harvey and the like. Look at floods. Right now, Kenya is actually facing excessive rainfall, and we are seeing a lot of destruction of infrastructure, roads. We are seeing bridges giving way, and this definitely is having such a huge impact on the economy. It's having an impact on agricultural yield. It's having an impact on socioeconomic activities and the like. But this could easily have been Florida, right? Or Puerto Rico, or Texas, which was suffering from Hurricane Harvey. And as you see, the impacts are quite indiscriminate. It doesn't choose. When a hurricane is sweeping through, it doesn't choose a neighborhood, does it? It just sweeps through. Let's look at droughts, for example. So Kenya is considered to be about 80% arid and semi-arid land, making it very vulnerable to phenomena such as drought. And we are very dependent on climate vulnerable sectors like agriculture, tourism, fishing. So of course, when such things like drought hit us, food security becomes an increasing concern, and many other issues. We have a lot of people suffering from malnutrition. We have reduced yields. And I was recently just reading that Pennsylvania as well might be facing reduced corn yield because of increasingly hot summers. So such examples just draw to show that there are so many similarities between both the developed and developing world when it comes to the impacts of climate change. I mean, look at California struggling with the wildfires and just the recently ended drought in 2017. So I'm sure you're wondering, then where does the difference lie? The difference lies in how quickly can we fight back? How quickly can we rise? Do we have adequate adaptive capacity to be able to rise up from certain adverse impacts? When a drought hits California, for example, are they going to ask the global community for food aid? Are they going to say that our people are hungry? And perhaps that's something which is very common in my part of the world. When drought hits, we are running all over the place. We need food aid. We need, we need to donate. We need to figure out how we are going to feed our people. So that's where the difference lies. And that brings me to my next point. Climate adaptation then becomes very important for the developing world, in as much as mitigation should also be a focus, because our emissions are increasing by the day as we develop. Climate adaptation for us becomes key. It's important for us to develop a certain kind of resilience to protect ourselves from the vulnerabilities of these adverse impacts. For example, look at the agricultural sector. It's important to begin to think about diversification of food crops, move away from extreme reliance on maize, for example. Think about cassava, think about other things that can feed our people. Think about drought-resistant crops. Think about moving away from rain-fed agriculture to certain irrigation activities. Think about developing adequate food storage facilities. Look at a country like Australia. Australia can experience drought for even a decade, but they have such advanced food storage facilities that, well, they don't eat great food, but they don't lack food. That's the difference. Think about issues dealing with floods. Are we doing enough to ensure that we are retrofitting our infrastructure? Are we doing enough to ensure that we are dealing with stormwater management? Are we doing enough to ensure that we are dealing with the quality of water? So we need to think about this kind of things in our part of the world. And this brings me to my next 3 takeaways. I was supposed to say 3 things that are so important for us. I think for me, the first thing would be innovation. Why do I say innovation? We are living in an era of technology. And so climate action must be contextualized within an era of technology. We have to think about how we can use technology to advance climate action. I saw a very interesting video where people in Cape Town are actually having what they call waterless car washes. So they're not using water to wash their cars because Cape Town has no water. So it's true, actually. So they're trying to, they're trying to adapt to their current situation. And in that form of adaptation, someone has actually innovated a business opportunity. So come to my waterless car wash. We are having people advancing hydroponics in the area of agriculture, where they use almost no water to be able to come up with food crops. Those are very innovative business ideas that are taking advantage of technology to be able to advance climate action. And many other examples could be given. So it's important for us to embrace technology and innovation as we think of climate action. My second takeaway would be bottom-up approaches. All of you who are familiar with the Paris Climate Agreement, I think would agree with me when I say that this really is the architecture of this document. It's moving away from a top-down approach to an approach where we are engaging local government, non-state actors, the business community, indigenous people, women, all those vulnerable groups to be able to contribute to climate action. So bottom-up approaches, why are they important? Bottom-up approaches give communities a chance to localize their realities. Climate adaptation is very specific. Even when you give examples of Pennsylvania, those examples cannot relate to people in California or Oregon because the climate is different, the natural resources they're endowed with is different, their socioeconomic activities are different, their ideologies are also different. So bottom-up approaches that give communities a chance to have that autonomy, that localized approach towards climate action becomes very important. And the last takeaway for me would be partnerships and data. I mean, data is the future. Everywhere I go to, people are saying big data, big data. So big data, quality data, it becomes very important because how do you track your progress if you don't have adequate baselines? How are you able to say that we've moved from point A to point B if you didn't take time to be able to have, adequate quality data? Look at a very good example in the transport sector, for example. Active transport becomes very difficult to convince certain policymakers to integrate active transport because they say we don't have enough data to see the abatement of emissions that we can get from walking or biking. So it becomes important for us who are trying to push for this sort of climate action in various sectors to be able to say, hey, look, these are the figures. This is what we can be able to achieve. So data becomes important. And how are we going to generate such data? Let's share those best case practices. Let's build partnerships where we can share our ideas.